My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 32 years old, living in a city that doesn't quite feel like home, Denver, Colorado. I'm a freelance architect, working on design projects for wealthy clients who see their homes as status symbols more than places of comfort. My work keeps me busy, but it also keeps me distant, disconnected from the world I grew up in. If you ask me where I'm from, I'd say a small town in Wyoming, a place with open skies and endless fields, but I don't feel tied to it anymore. Not after what happened to me and my family. When I was younger, Havenfield was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and everyone knew each other's business. My childhood was nothing like the idyllic scenes painted in movies. Instead of weekends at amusement parks or family picnics in the park, my memories were filled with broken glass, empty bottles, and the constant feeling of being unwanted. My father, Raymond Carter, was a mechanic. When he wasn't working, he was drinking, and when he was drinking, he was angry. His rage was like a storm that came and went, leaving destruction in its wake. My mother, on the other hand, was emotionally distant. She had dreams once, I think, but those faded long before I was born. She worked as a waitress at a local diner, but her dreams were buried under the weight of a failing marriage and a life she never wanted. I was the oldest of three, with a younger sister, Ellie, and a brother, Luke. I used to think that as the oldest, I had some kind of responsibility to protect them, to shield them from the chaos that ruled our household. But as I grew older, I realized I was just as lost as they were. Havenfield was not the kind of town where dreams took root. The streets were lined with aging houses, cracked sidewalks, and rusted cars that never seemed to go anywhere. I spent my childhood in a small house on the edge of town, just far enough to feel like we didn't belong, but close enough to be reminded of it every day. The house was falling apart, the roof leaking, the floors creaking, and the walls peeling. But it wasn't the house that felt broken. It was us. I remember when I was 7, sitting on the porch steps with my father. He'd just come home from a long day at the garage, smelling of gasoline and motor oil, with a beer in his hand. We didn't speak much, but there was something about those quiet moments when he would talk about our ancestors, about how we were descended from strong men who fought wars and built empires. Carter blood is tough blood, he'd say with a grin, his voice full of pride. I cherished those moments, because they were the only times I saw him as something other than a man whose temper could break a wall with a single punch. My mother, however, was never the one to offer comfort. She was distant, as though she was just going through the motions of life. I remember once, when I brought home a drawing from school, a picture of a house with a big tree in the front yard, something I thought was beautiful. I was hoping she'd put it on the refrigerator, like the other mothers did with their children's art. Instead, she glanced at it and then turned away, saying, "You're wasting your time with this." I never brought her another drawing. Ellie and Luke were too young to understand what was happening around them. Ellie had wide blue eyes and a smile that could melt anyone's heart. She didn't understand why Mom and Dad fought, but she did understand that it made me sad, and that was enough for her to cling to me, her big brother. Luke, only 4 at the time, looked up to me like I was his protector, and I tried my best to be one. But as I got older, I realized that I couldn't protect them. Not from this. Not from the dark hole of despair that had swallowed our family. The worst part wasn't the yelling. It wasn't the broken furniture or the walls that seemed to close in on us. It was the silence that came after. The kind of silence that made you wonder if anyone would care if you just disappeared. When I was 15, things started to escalate. My father's drinking got worse, and his rages grew more violent. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, when the sounds of shouting and glass breaking echoed through the house. One night, after my father lost his job at the auto shop because of a drunken argument, he came home and demanded that I do something about it. "You're the oldest," he spat. "You should be taking care of this family. You think you're better than me because you got that damn scholarship? You think you're too good for this place?" I couldn't bear it anymore. I had dreams, big ones, and I wasn't going to let my father's bitterness take them away from me. That night, I packed my things and left. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just walked out the door, with nothing but a bag of clothes and a heart full of hope that someday I'd escape. When I left Havenfield, everything seemed to blur in my mind, like a fading dream. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision. I had no home to go to except for a place where I could finally be free. Denver, an unfamiliar city that promised new beginnings. The first few days in Denver were overwhelming. The city felt massive and chaotic. Unlike Havenfield, there were no familiar faces here. Just the cold streets, the towering buildings, and the sound of unfamiliar voices. I didn't know anyone, and yet I felt strangely isolated, like an outsider in a sea of strangers. I found a small room in a rundown building and took a job as a dishwasher at a local diner. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I lived in the city for several weeks, always moving through the days without any real direction, my past still clinging to me like a shadow. Despite the new environment, I felt just as lost as before. Havenfield wasn't just a place, it was a part of me, one I couldn't easily escape. I spent my evenings in that small room, my thoughts drifting back to my family, my parents, and the life I had left behind. The phone calls from my mom, the ones that were almost always about money, began to increase. I sent them what I could, though I knew it would only end up in their hands to be spent on alcohol. In the midst of this routine, I met Sarah. It was a quiet afternoon at the diner. I was washing dishes when I noticed her for the first time. Standing at the counter, her long brown hair tied back and a soft smile on her face as she handed me a coffee cup. "Hey, need some help with that?" she asked, her voice full of warmth. I didn't know why, but it felt like her smile offered me a moment of peace in a life full of chaos. We started talking more frequently after that, and I felt an instant connection. Sarah didn't judge me, didn't look at me like I was broken. She seemed to see beyond my past, beyond the tired eyes and ragged clothes. She made me feel seen, in a way no one had before. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up. I told her about my childhood in Havenfield, about the broken home, the constant struggle, and the scars that were still so fresh. I told her about my siblings Declan and Liam and the pain of leaving them behind. Sarah listened quietly, never interrupting, never trying to fix things. She just listened, and that was enough. Before long, Sarah and I started dating. She was my first real connection outside of the life I had escaped, and she made me feel alive again. We would go on long walks, talk about our hopes and dreams, and find comfort in each other's presence. For the first time, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future outside the shadows of my past. But, even as I built a new life, I couldn't escape the pull of my family. Every time I received a call from them, I felt the tension building in my chest. It wasn't just that they wanted money, it was the constant reminder that they were still trapped in the same toxic cycle. My father's voice on the phone, demanding more, the way my mother always blamed me for not being there, even when I had nothing left to give. But there was Sarah. She made it bearable. She reminded me that I wasn't the same person who had left Havenfield. She believed in me, even when I didn't. She was my anchor, the one thing that kept me grounded in a world that felt like it was falling apart. Then one day, I received another call from my parents. This time, it was different. My father's voice was rougher, more urgent than ever before. "Kieran, you need to come back," he said. "It's important." I hesitated, knowing I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to face the ghosts of my past. But there was something in his voice that made it impossible to ignore. I didn't have a choice. The drive back to Havenfield felt like an eternity. Every mile was a reminder of the things I had left behind, the life I had tried so desperately to forget. When I arrived, I found my father sitting in his armchair, a bottle of whiskey beside him. My mother was standing in the corner, her eyes cold and distant. "Sit down, Kieran," my father said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I've got something to tell you." I sat, my stomach tightening with dread. He looked at me, his bloodshot eyes betraying his words. "Patrick O'Connell has a proposition. His daughter Nora, she needs a husband, and I think you're the perfect man for the job." I froze. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Patrick O'Connell was an old acquaintance of my father's, a man who had always seemed kind but distant. His daughter Nora was paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident. I'd heard of her, but I'd never met her. I didn't know what to say. "You're going to marry her, Kieran," my father continued, as if the decision had already been made. "Patrick promised us $500,000 if you agree to this. Think about it, this could change everything for us. We could finally live the life we've always wanted." The words swirled in my head, the desperation in my father's voice ringing in my ears. $500,000. It was a sum that could change everything. But it wasn't about the money, it was about what they wanted to use me for. I was just another tool in their plan. "I won't do it," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I'm not marrying anyone I don't love. I have Sarah," my father sneered. "You think you're too good for this family now, don't you? You wouldn't be anything without me. You owe us." I stared at him, my heart pounding. This wasn't the father I remembered. This wasn't the man who used to tell me stories about our Irish ancestors. This was someone else's stranger who was willing to sell me out for money. "I'm not doing it," I repeated, my voice firm. "I don't owe you anything." But no matter how firm I was, the pressure from my parents only grew. And that night, after everything fell apart, I found myself staring at a future I never wanted? Would I be forced to sacrifice everything I'd worked for? Would I let them win? In the end, it wasn't just the money that changed things, it was the realization that my past would always haunt me if I didn't face it. So, I made a decision. It was time to let go of everything that held me back. I had Sarah. I had a chance at a future, and I would fight for it. The next few days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. My mind raced between anger and confusion, the weight of my father's demand hanging over me like a dark cloud. I kept hearing his voice echoing in my head. "You owe us, Kieran." Those words stung, digging into the very core of me. I tried to focus on my life with Sarah. She was my grounding force, the one thing that made me feel whole, but even she could see the turmoil inside me. She noticed the way I'd withdrawn, the way my eyes wandered into the distance, as if I were somewhere else entirely. "Kieran," she said one evening as we sat together on the couch, a movie playing quietly in the background, "talk to me. I can see something's bothering you." I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the emotions that threatened to burst free. "It's my parents," I admitted, my voice low. "They're pressuring me to marry someone I don't even know. Someone who doesn't love me. They think they can buy my loyalty with money." Sarah looked at me, her eyes soft and understanding. "I know," she said. "I heard the frustration in your voice when you told me about their demands. But Kieran, you're not obligated to give them anything. They're using you." Her words felt like a lifeline, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still tied to them, bound by the past in ways I couldn't escape. "But what if I'm wrong?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What if I'm the one who's letting them down? What if this is my last chance to make them proud?" Sarah reached out, gently taking my hand in hers. "You don't owe them your life, Kieran. You owe it to yourself to be happy, to follow your heart. And your heart isn't in Havenfield anymore. It's with me." I looked at her, the sincerity in her eyes overwhelming me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that I could walk away from the ghosts of my past, but the chains of my upbringing held tight. I had spent so many years trying to please my parents, trying to be the perfect son, and now, when I had the chance to finally stand on my own 2 feet, I was being asked to sacrifice my happiness for a sum of money. It felt like I was stuck in the same cycle all over again. Only now, the price of my soul was $500,000. The night I decided to return to Havenfield, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Part of me was terrified of what they might ask of me next. But another part of me was numb. I had already made up my mind to do what I had to in order to protect Sarah and myself. As the bus rolled through the streets of Havenfield, everything seemed smaller. The streets that once felt so overwhelming now felt cramped, suffocating. The faded houses with peeling paint, the small, worn-out grocery store where I used to buy the few groceries we could afford it, all felt like a reminder of the life I had outgrown. When I arrived at the house, the familiar smell of stale alcohol and the sound of distant shouting greeted me. My father was sitting in his usual spot in the living room, slouched in the armchair with a bottle in his hand. My mother was in the kitchen, her back to me, busy with something I couldn't quite see. I stood there for a moment, just watching them. The anger from my earlier confrontation had faded, replaced by a heavy sadness. They were the same. Always the same. Well, look who's back," my father grunted, looking up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a mask of indifference. "I didn't think you'd come back. What's it gonna be, Kieran? Are you gonna do what's right for the family, or what's right for you?" I felt the familiar ache of frustration, but this time, I didn't let it control me. "I'm here because I need to make things clear," I said, my voice steady, but deep down, my heart was pounding. "I'm not marrying Nora. I'm not doing this for you, for the money, or for anyone else." My mother turned to look at me then, her face pinched with frustration. "You think you can walk away from your family, Kieran? You think you can just forget about us? We've given everything for you. And now? You're turning your back on us?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not turning my back on you. I'm turning my back on the life you've made me live. I'm done with this. I'm done with you." My father stood up, his fists clenched. "You think you're better than me? You think you can just leave this all behind and start a new life? You're still my son, Kieran, and you'll do what I say." The words stung, but I refused to back down. "Number, I'm done being your puppet. I'm done trying to be the son you want me to be. I have my own life now." For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for myself. Not for the child I used to be, but for the man I had become. The silence between us was thick, the air heavy with unspoken words. My father's anger burned in the pit of my stomach, but I stood my ground. This time, I wouldn't let him break me. I left the house that night with a newfound sense of clarity. The weight that had been bearing down on me for years had finally lifted. I had done it. I had walked away. But the pain of the past still lingered. I couldn't help but think of my siblings, Declan and Liam, still trapped in that house. I couldn't stop myself from thinking about how much they needed to escape. I called Sarah the moment I got home. Her voice, soft and reassuring, was the balm my soul needed. "Kieran, I'm proud of you. I know how hard this has been for you, but you're free now. You don't have to keep carrying their burdens." "I know," I said, the relief washing over me like a wave. "I know. And I'm ready to start over." It wasn't easy, but I knew that I had made the right choice. The road ahead was uncertain, but I finally felt like I was on the right path. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to move forward. For myself, and for the people who truly mattered. The weeks after my confrontation with my parents were a blur. I spent every waking moment trying to regain control over my life, trying to figure out what my future would look like. For the first time in my life, I had the freedom to make choices for myself. No more living under the shadow of my father's demands or my mother's indifference. But even with that newfound freedom, I couldn't escape the guilt. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought of Declan and Liam. They were still trapped in that house, still living under the same oppressive roof that had shaped my own childhood. No matter how much I told myself that I had to focus on my own future, I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed them something. They needed to escape too. Sarah was by my side, always. Her support had been unwavering, but even she could see the conflict in my eyes. One evening, after dinner, as we sat together on the couch in our small apartment in Boulder, I finally let it all out. "I can't stop thinking about them," I said, my voice tight. "Declan and Liam don't deserve to be there. They don't deserve the life I had, and I don't know how to help them." Sarah put down her book and turned to face me. Her expression was kind, understanding. "You can't save everyone, Kieran," she said softly, her fingers brushing mine. "You've done everything you can. You've given them the chance to break free by showing them it's possible." "I know," I whispered, "but I can't just leave them there. I can't forget what it was like." Sarah gave me a reassuring smile, her eyes full of love. "You're not leaving them behind, Kieran. You're giving them the tools to do it themselves, but you have to let go of that guilt. You're not responsible for their lives. They are." Her words were simple, but they settled deep into my heart, like a weight lifting off my chest. She was right. I couldn't keep carrying the burden of my family's mistakes. My life was mine to live, and I needed to stop holding myself back. The next day I made the decision. I called Declan. "Hey, little bro," I said when he picked up. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "Hey, Kieran. How's everything?" I took a deep breath. "I'm fine. Listen, I've been thinking. I know things haven't been easy for you and Liam, and I want to help." Declan was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him breathing through the phone. "What do you mean?" he asked softly. "I want to get you out of there," I said, my heart pounding. "I want you to come here, to Boulder. I've got a job lined up for you. You can start fresh, you and Liam." There was a long pause on the other end, and I felt my stomach twist. I could hear the uncertainty in Declan's voice when he finally spoke. "Are you sure, Kieran? I mean, we don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," I said, my voice firm. "You're family, and family doesn't leave each other behind. I'm not going to let you live in that house any longer. Come stay with me. We'll figure it out together." Declan was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't because he was unsure. I could hear the relief in his breath. I don't know what to say, Kieran. You really mean it?" "I do," I said. "I'll take care of you. And Liam, just come." The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. I booked a flight for Declan, arranged a place for him and Liam to stay, and spent hours on the phone making sure everything was in order. I couldn't afford to waste any time. When Declan and Liam finally arrived in Boulder, I met them at the airport, my heart racing with anticipation. Seeing them walk through the terminal, their faces tired but hopeful, was everything I had been fighting for them to have a better life. We drove back to our apartment in silence, the air thick with the weight of all that had happened. But as we pulled into the parking lot, something shifted. Declan and Liam were no longer the boys I left behind in that suffocating house. They were young men, strong, resilient, and ready to begin their own journey. "Welcome home," I said as I opened the door. "This is your place now, too." Declan looked around, his eyes wide. It's beautiful, Kieran. Thank you." Liam smiled shyly, his usual energy replaced with a quiet but genuine appreciation. "I never thought I'd be able to leave. I never thought there was anything else." I put my arm around Declan's shoulders, pulling him close. "There's always something else, little brother. I'll make sure you both get it. You're not alone anymore. And for the first time, I felt like I had fulfilled the promise I made to myself all those years ago, to give Declan and Liam the chance to escape the hell we were all born into, to give them a life where they could be happy, safe, and free. As time passed, things slowly began to fall into place. Declan found a job at a local construction company and enrolled in classes at a nearby community college where he excelled. Liam, on the other hand, started pursuing his passion for art, his paintings slowly filling the walls of our apartment. The transition wasn't always easy. They had their moments of doubt and fear, but they were doing it. They were living a life outside the confines of Havenfield. I felt a pride in them that I hadn't realized I was capable of. They had taken the opportunity I gave them and made it their own. They were thriving. But even with the joy of seeing my brothers flourish, there was still something that gnawed at me. My relationship with Nora had become more complicated. We had started as strangers, bound by circumstance. But as time went on, I began to question if I had made the right choice in marrying her. There was nothing wrong with Hirsch, was kind, intelligent, and resilient. But somewhere along the way, I realized that we were both simply filling voids left by our pasts. As I sat down to talk with Nora one evening, I felt the weight of those thoughts on my shoulders. I looked at her, sitting across from me in the living room, her fingers running over the pages of a book. "Nora," I said, my voice steady but with a hint of hesitation. "We need to talk." She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "About what?" I don't know how to say this," I began. "I don't think I'm the right person for you. I think I married you for all the wrong reasons. I'm sorry." The words were out before I could stop them, and I watched as Nora's face shifted from surprise to understanding. "You don't need to apologize," she said quietly. "I've known. I knew this wasn't a real marriage, but I've been waiting for you to figure it out. I've been waiting for you to stop running." I blinked, shocked by the calmness in her voice. "You've been waiting?" Nora nodded. "Yes. I wanted more for you than just this. I wanted you to find happiness. Real happiness. Not the kind that comes from doing what other people want you to do." I stared at her, my heart heavy with the truth she had spoken so easily. In that moment, I realized that Nora had given me the freedom I had so desperately needed. She hadn't trapped me. She had set me free. As I looked back at my life, I saw how far I had come. I had faced the darkness of my past, overcome the weight of my family's expectations, and finally found the strength to live for myself. I had made the right choice, and now I was ready for whatever came next. I had a future to build, not just for myself, but for the people who mattered most: Declan, Liam, Sarah, and yes, even Nora. We had all been hurt by the past, but we were not defined by it. The road ahead would not be easy, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't walking it alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The days following my conversation with Nora were a blur of emotions. I felt relief, yes, but also guilt. Nora had been nothing but kind and patient, and I'd never wanted to hurt her. She had been a friend, a companion through the darkest parts of my life, but now, as I thought about it more, I realized we had both been living in a world of obligations rather than love. I had married her because my family had forced me to, and she had accepted because she felt trapped in her own way. The truth had always been clear to me, but it took me years to admit it, and now I was faced with the aftermath. Nora took the news better than I expected, but there was still an emptiness that lingered between us. The house we shared, though filled with memories of us planting flowers in the garden and spending quiet evenings together, now felt like a place we had both outgrown. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel that I owed her. Something she had stood by me in ways no one else had. She had cared for me when I was lost, and I had been unable to do the same. I spent the next few weeks reflecting on my life, trying to figure out what to do next. I had worked so hard to get away from Havenfield, to build something better for myself, but it felt like the ties to my past still held me in place. I needed to do more. I needed to find a way to make it right. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the papers I had spread out in front of me: reports on the mining operation, financial projections for a new sustainable mining initiative, and more. I could feel the weight of everything pressing on my shoulders, from my past to the obligations I had yet to fulfill. And then, I remembered the promise I made to Declan and Liam. I hadn't forgotten about them. No, they were never far from my mind. They had left Havenfield with me, and now it was my responsibility to give them the life they deserved. I couldn't allow them to be stuck in the same toxic environment I had been in for all those years. They were doing well in Boulder, but there was more I could do for them. That night, I picked up the phone and called Declan. "Hey, it's Kieran," I said when he answered. "How's everything?" "I'm good, man," he said. his voice sounding more confident than it had in years. "Liam's painting more, and I've got a few projects at work. Things are okay." "I'm glad to hear it," I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest. "Listen, I've been thinking. I want to do more for you two. I've been offered an opportunity that could change things, and I think it's time we take it." Declan was quiet for a moment. "What kind of opportunity?" "A chance to buy land," I said, my voice steady but filled with excitement. "Real land. I'm not talking about just a house. I'm talking about something bigger. We could build a future there. Together. Something permanent. No more worrying about rent or where the next paycheck comes from." Declan's silence deepened, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. "You mean it?" "I do," I said firmly. "This is our shot, Declan. No more looking back. I want you to help me make it happen." The next few weeks passed quickly as we began to explore the land deal. It was an old ranch in a secluded part of Colorado, far from the reach of city life. The land had been abandoned for years, but I could see potential in it. Declan was on board immediately, and we both started putting together plans for the future. As for Liam, his painting had begun to show more promise. The idea of a house and land to call his own seemed to spark something inside of him. He threw himself into his work with renewed energy, and I couldn't help but feel proud of both of them. They were stronger than I ever gave them credit for, and now it was time to give them the life they deserved. But things weren't as simple as they seemed. When I spoke with the owners of the land, they told me the price was far higher than I expected. The figures were daunting. For someone who had lived a life constantly worrying about the next bill, this was a major challenge. I didn't have the funds to make it work, and I didn't want to burden Sarah with this new responsibility. One day, I was sitting in the cafe down the street, going over the paperwork again. I could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of my decisions threatening to pull me under. And then, as I sat there staring at the papers, I remembered something. It had been months since I last heard from my parents. No surprise there, they never bothered to contact me unless they needed something. But as I thought about it, I realized that they still held some sway over me. It wasn't about love anymore, but about power. They had used me as a pawn for their own gain, and I couldn't let them continue to control my future. I picked up my phone and dialed their number. My hand was shaking as I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and then my father's voice came through. "Kieran," he said, his voice rough. "What is it? You don't call unless you need something." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm asking for something this time, Dad. I need your help. I want you to help me buy that land. I've got the plans. I just need the funding." My father's laugh was low and dismissive. "You think I'm just going to hand over money, Kieran? What for? You think I owe you?" I gritted my teeth. "I don't think you owe me, but I'm asking anyway. Declan and Liam need this, and I can't do it on my own." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought he might hang up on me, but then he spoke, his tone changing. "Fine," he said finally. "I'll help you, but don't think this means I'm doing it out of kindness. You owe me. You always will." I felt a wave of anger rush over me, but I swallowed it down. I had made the decision. This was the path I had chosen, and I had to follow through. The deal went through, and soon we had the land. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We started working on it immediately, Declan taking charge of the construction while Liam worked on creating art for the house. We spent our days planning and dreaming of what our new life would look like, and for the first time in years I felt hope. Real, true hope. Sarah, as always, stood by me, supporting every decision I made. She visited the land with me, smiling at the progress we were making. "I think this is really going to be something special," she said one evening as we stood at the edge of the property watching the sunset. "I think you're right," I said, taking her hand. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally on the path I was meant to be on. Not because of the land or the house, but because I had the people who mattered most by my side. The road had been long, filled with struggles and sacrifices, but I had found my family, me real family in the process. And together, we would build something that none of us had ever thought possible. We would build a future. Months passed since the land purchase, and things started to settle into a rhythm. The house, though still under construction, began to take shape. The foundation was solid, and the framework of the walls seemed to whisper promises of a new beginning. It wasn't the dream home I once envisioned, but it was becoming ours, something we could claim as our own, a place that didn't carry the weight of history or broken promises. Declan worked tirelessly, driving us toward our vision. The quiet strength he carried in his demeanor was awe-inspiring. He had grown into someone far more resilient than I had ever expected. He wasn't just working on a building, he was building his own future. Liam, too, found his place. His passion for painting began to bloom, and soon our home was filled with his vibrant canvases. It was a strange yet beautiful contrast, the raw and rugged beauty of the land surrounding us, paired with the warmth and color inside our walls. It felt like home. Nora and I had settled into an unusual rhythm, one marked by peaceful silence interspersed with deep, meaningful conversations. The weight of the past off the forced marriage, and the family I had left behind, seemed to drift away with each passing day. We had both suffered, but there was healing in the quiet moments, in the conversations we shared about our hopes and dreams. The old feelings of guilt I had carried for so long began to dissipate. In their place, a quiet understanding grew between us, an acknowledgement of the effort we both put in to make this new life work. We were not the perfect couple, not by any means, but we were building something real. Our connection wasn't about obligation anymore. It was something far more grounded in mutual respect and shared experiences. Nora had become my companion in the truest sense, and in a strange way, we had both found solace in the life we were creating together. But just as I started to believe that everything was falling into place, life had a way of throwing yet another curveball. It was one crisp autumn morning when I received the call from Declan. His voice was frantic, a stark contrast to the calm nature he usually carried. "Kieran, you need to come back. Now, it's about the land." I felt the blood rush from my face, and I immediately got in the truck and drove toward the site. My mind raced with all the possible scenarios. What had gone wrong? The land was supposed to be the foundation for everything, our escape from Havenfield's shadow, a chance for all of us to start fresh. Had it all fallen apart? When I arrived at the site, Declan and Liam were already waiting. Declan's face was grim, his hands gripping the blueprint we'd worked on together. Liam stood next to him, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, looking far too young to carry the weight he seemed to feel. "What's happened?" I asked, my voice betraying the fear that had gripped me. "It's the land," Declan said, shaking his head. "There's been a complication. We've been contacted by a developer from Denver. They want to buy the land, but the price they're offering, it's too good to pass up, too good to ignore." I stared at Declan, trying to process what he was saying. The developer's offer was a huge sum, a life-changing amount of money, far more than we could have imagined. For a moment, I was tempted. The thought of selling, cashing in, and securing a future without the heavy burden of land development seemed like an easy way out. We could finally move on, no more worrying about building from scratch, no more sweating over blueprints and construction costs. But then, I saw Nora's face. She had come to the site with me, silently walking among the trees, her eyes scanning the landscape. She could see the potential of this place the way I did, the way we all did. And as I looked at her, I knew that this land wasn't just a financial investment. It was something far deeper. It was our symbol of resilience, of our ability to create something out of nothing, to escape the confines of our past. "Nora," I said softly, turning to her, "what do you think?" She was quiet for a long time, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if she could see more than just the land before her. She had always been the more level-headed of us, the calm in the storm, but now, her voice held a quiet intensity. "I think we don't need to sell," she said, her words steady, confident. "We've come this far, Kieran. Don't let them buy our future. This is ours. Let's build something here, something we can be proud of." I nodded, the decision suddenly clear in my mind. No amount of money could replace the life we were building on this land. The choices we made weren't always easy, but they were ours to make. It wasn't about the quick solution, the instant gratification. It was about the long term, the dream we had for ourselves, for Declan, for Liam, and for Nora. We refused the developer's offer. The next few months were a blur of work, but it felt different now. There was no longer a looming fear of failure. We were truly building something from the ground up, not just houses and gardens, but lives our lives. I worked closely with the construction team, managing the finances, finding ways to make the project sustainable while staying true to our vision. Declan worked on the site, shaping it into a home. Liam helped design a small art studio where he could continue painting, and he even helped Nora with her new gardening project. Nora, with her sharp mind and incredible strength, worked alongside us all, offering insights into the project, offering new ways to approach the challenges we faced. She had become a force in her own right, and with her by my side, I felt invincible. As spring approached, the house was finally finished. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was ours. We moved in, filled the rooms with memories, and looked forward to the future with hope in our hearts. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly home. Looking back on everything on Havenfield, on my parents, On the years of pain and struggle it seemed surreal. But in this moment, as I sat on the porch with Nora, Declan, and Liam, watching the sunset over the mountains, I realized something. No matter how hard it had been, no matter how much we had suffered, we had come through it all. We had created our own future. And that was the most important thing. In the end, we weren't just building a house. We were building a life together,